an early congratulations for your upcoming release of I Have a Father. And I wanted to ask first, how long was this project in the making for you?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It's exciting to be able to share this album now. So it's really been 3 years, I think, for this particular project. Well, if I think back to when the earliest song was written, it was 3 years ago. And the whole past 3 years have been really a dedicated time of writing. And then the past year has been really devoted to just recording it and making everything as good as it can be and kind of rewriting some stuff. And then the past 6 months putting it out. So it's been quite a long process, really.
It sounds like it. I'm curious for you, since it's been such a long journey, what's the unifying theme that brings these tracks together, and how has it morphed throughout that period of time, if it has?
The unifying theme for these songs is definitely that they are very personal and conversational between me and God. I was involved in a really great campus ministry in college called St. Paul's Outreach, and through that, I lived with a bunch of other Catholic guys my age, and we really just tried to live the Christian faith together. And so we tried to have daily prayer lives, and we would do outreach events, and almost 100%, actually even 100% of these songs came from that time period of my life. And it was a really actually, I was a young, like, Christian. I've grown up in the church, but that 5 years of college was really when I started to own my faith and when I started to really get to know Christ. And so all of these songs are unified through that, because they were all written through that time period. And they're all very conversational. A lot of them take place in the first person, and they're just kind of my prayers to God. It's almost like someone's reading my prayer journal if they listen through the album.
That's great. I'm curious, since you said it was such a long time with the writing, how did you know when you were writing the last song, or did you know when you were writing the last song, that the project was going to be complete at that point?
I don't think I really did know. I think what really helped me out, and this was a blessing, was to have other people kind of have say in the project. So I ended up getting signed by a publisher, and not really a record label, but they do some record label stuff. And so through that, there were other people who said, hey, well, we want these 11 songs, or we want these songs and not those songs. I really came to them with like 50 or more songs and just said, let's make an album here.
That's great. I'm curious, since, if I'm not mistaken, this is your debut full-length project. How do you think it shares who you are as an artist?
I think this project really does. It really does feel like me. These 11 songs on this project are, like I said, they're really, really personal. A lot of them are my emotions and my conversations with God. But then the sounds, too, I think are very much the sound. As opposed to my first project, it was a little more experimental, a little more me taking existing prayers and drawing inspiration from outside sources. This one is very much my own thoughts put to music.
Oh, that's great. I'm curious, of all of the tracks, thinking through them, is there a lyric or a track that you think that the world most needs to hear in its current state?
I'm particularly drawn to different ones than I think that other people would be drawn to. As an artist and as a musician, the line that sticks out to me is from the song that hasn't come out yet. It's called Let My Tongue Be Silenced. and the line is, "Let my tongue be silenced if I ever forget you, Lord." And I just think that's a really powerful thing, and it's something that, as Christian musicians and ministers, we really should keep in the front of our minds.
Absolutely. How are you looking to define success for this project? And I mean, success can be a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So I'm just curious what your metric is for this project.
I think this project is successful if people listen to it and they relate to it. We spent a lot of time, and we being me and the publisher, the team over there at OCP, and the producer, Paul Moak, and all the musicians who played, we really put a lot of energy and thought into how can we make this the most authentic project that it can be. And with that, how can we make it something that people will connect to and hear their own stories in it? Or maybe not their own stories, but they'll hear a song or a sentiment or a prayer and say, I want to know God in that way, or maybe it draws them into a conversation with God. I think that if those outcomes happen, it will have been successful in my mind.
That's great. So you've actually released some Grat tracks ahead of the full project release so far. I'm curious from the feedback that you've been getting from listeners if there's a recurring lyric or theme or just feedback point that perhaps you weren't expecting to hear but you're getting.
I think that I have actually been kind of surprised at the songs that people are grabbing onto, and those ones really seem to be the ones that are more prayerful and more reflective. There's a lot of like high energy tracks on this project, but there's also a couple that are just very like introspective, and they're kind of like reflection and meditative songs, and those seem to be the ones that people are really grabbing onto, which kind of surprised me a little bit.
Oh, that's great. I'm curious where you're currently pulling inspiration from, musically or spiritually for yourself in this time.
Well, usually my inspiration comes from my prayer life and, just walking the walk of the Christian faith. Every now and then I'll write an indie track, and that's fun, and I love it. But really, as a writer, I just don't really sit down and say, I'm going to write about X. I just sit down and then something's on my heart and I write it. And so kind of my closeness to God and walking with Christ is really what inspires it. And I guess just whatever season of life I'm in or whatever I'm going through, or maybe it is a hard time for me to pray, or maybe I'm not really feeling very close to God, those could be inspirations. And then on the other hand, like when I am really experiencing the joy of being in God's presence, that's another huge inspiration to me. So it's really just kind of a daily prayer that drives my songwriting.
That's great. So I have one final question for you, and you can have it be a musical or not musical answer, however you want to take it. But what are you most expectant for in 2022?
I think in 2022. That's a good question. I honestly am kind of expecting some change. I've been, like I said, this has been a 3-year process, and it's really been kind of a big item on my to-do list to get the songs written, get the album recorded, get the thing out there, and now it's time to share that with people and share all of that intentional time and effort put into these songs. And now it's time to just let them hit people and see what happens. So I think it'll be a different rhythm, a different kind of focus, maybe from less production and preparation to now it's time to go out and share it.
That's great. I want to thank you for taking the time today, and I also want to wish you best of luck again with this when it does drop.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.